Hey guys, this video I'm going to show you a really nice way of squaring up your crosscut sled. I first saw this method from William Ng on YouTube. If you haven't checked out his channel, he's got a really good channel with a lot of informative videos on there. If this video doesn't make any sense to you, go check his out. But all you're going to need to square up your crosscut sled is a piece of scrap material, preferably have a fairly decent sized piece, one that's if you can get one that's almost as wide as your crosscut sled is, that'd be preferable. But try and get something that's a bit on the larger side. Don't just use a little tiny piece. The bigger the better for this. It'll make it a little easier. You need a tape and a set of calipers. That's pretty much all you need to do this. Well, you'll need a drill, and you'll have to loosen the screw here and readjust it as necessary. But this is really about all you're gonna need. So let's get to it here. Okay, so to actually use this method, I think a lot of people refer to it as the 5-cut method. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our piece of scrap material and we're gonna cut ours with the long direction running with the blade first. That's what we'll cut first. So we're gonna label this, we're gonna label this side 1. We'll label the top, cut 2. This will be 3, 4, and then we'll make our 5th cut back here on the first side that we originally cut. So this will be cut 5 and 1. So basically what we're doing here is all the angles here when we make our cuts should be 90 degrees. However, it's very unlikely that they'll be perfect. We know that the sum of all these angles on a parallelogram equals 360 degrees, so we're going to use a little bit of geometry to help us figure out how far off our sled actually is from being square. So I'm going to go ahead here and make all 5 of the cuts, and when we make our 5th cut, instead of just shaving enough off here to make sure that we're getting our correct angles, I'm gonna slide it over about like this so that I actually have a piece that's about this wide. It could be this wide for all it matters, but you just need to have a piece that's wide enough that you can measure it with your calipers, because we're gonna have to measure the difference between the cut here and then also down here. So those are the 2 measurements that we'll end up needing. But let's get to it here and I'll show you how that's done. So what you're going to do is as this piece is cut off, just like this, the piece closest to the blade as it sits, this is going to be your A. So this is A, and this is B. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to take our piece, A being the side that was up here closest to the saw blade when we made our 5th cut. We're going to take our calipers and we'll measure the dimension of A, and do your best to get this measurement as exact as you can. So it looks like here we're 0.772 inches. So we're gonna write that down. Our A equals 0.772. Now we're gonna do the same for B. I'll flip it over. I'll grab my calipers again. And we'll measure B. And B is, I don't know if you can see it, 0.812. So now we'll write down B. 0.812. All right, so now we have to do a little bit of math. So we'll take A minus B, 0.772, which is A, minus 0.812, which is our B. And that gives us A minus B equals 0.772 minus 0.812. And that equals 0.04, or negative 0.04. What we're then going to do is we made 4 cuts. So we're going to divide that by 4. And that'll give us 0.01, or 1/100th. Then what we've got to figure out is how long this piece is. Our A to B, our cut length of our 5th cut. So I'm going to grab my tape here. Measure this. Looks to me like it is 12 1/8. So I have 12.125 inches. So we're going to take our 0.01, which is our A minus B, divided by 4. That's how we got 0.01. Now we're going to take that, and we're going to divide it by the total length of our 5th cut. So 0.01 divided by 12.125 gives us 0.0008247, or you can round that to the nearest 100,000th or so if you want. Basically, what we're going to do now is you're going to need to measure the distance on your fence. Now, I've got a bunch of holes in here because I've already attached mine with multiple screws, but you're going to need to go from your first pivot screw on the right side of your crosscut sled. So your first pivot screw, you're going to need to measure the distance between it and the screw that you placed on the left side. So if you measure that distance, and say, for simplicity's sake here, we're going to say it's 30 inches. I'm going to take 0.0008247, which is the number we got by dividing our A minus B divided by 4 cuts, and then we divided that number by the total length of our 5th cut to get this 0.0008247. So now we're gonna take that and we're gonna multiply that number by the distance between our pivot screw on the right side of our crosscut sled and the screw that we placed on the left side of the fence on our crosscut sled. That's gonna give us the distance that we have to adjust the fence, either forward or backwards. So this was a negative number, so I better keep my sign. So now I'm gonna multiply that by 30. That gives me 0.0247. So a little over 2/100ths that we need to move. So an easy way to adjust that is if you have a feeler gauge, you can use your feeler gauge, and I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. All right, I got my feeler gauge now. So this was the number that we determined we need to adjust our fence, 0.0247 inches. I think that's, yeah, 0.0247 inches. So I got my feeler gauge and I found, if you could see it here, it says 0.025 inches. So, and remember this is a negative number. So that means, if you don't think about it, let's look at it here. We took our A minus B and it was negative. So our A here, that means this dimension here was smaller than it was back here. And the way that happened is because this piece had to have been slightly turned just out of square this direction. Now this is exaggerated here, but if you think about it like this, that means that our fence must be slightly rotated back too far on the left side here. So a negative means that you need to move your fence forward. You need to move it up toward the blade. So we're going to have to adjust this fence forward here, this dimension, the 0.025. So an easy way to do that, I'll show you right here. Easy way to do that is before you move your fence at all, don't move your fence yet. Take a block of wood with a nice sharp point, slide it up against your fence there, get your feeler gauge, the correct dimension. You want to slide it in between your fence and your piece of wood, push it up against there nice and firm, and then get yourself a clamp. Clamp this down nice and tight, and remove your feeler gauge, and that leaves you a gap that should be exactly the dimension that you need to adjust your fence. So what you'll now do is you'll loosen your screw in this corner of your fence, you'll move your fence over that distance, clamp your fence down, and you'll need to drill a new hole in the bottom of your sled that's countersunk, obviously. You need to drill a new hole so that it doesn't try to go back in that same exact hole, which is then just gonna move your fence right back to where it just was. So you're gonna need a new hole, and once you screw that down in, it should be adjusted exactly the correct amount that it needed to be to get into perfect square. And then you can just check it again. You just do the same thing over again and check it. Adjust it as necessary if you need to adjust it anymore. But once you get it into square, fasten some more screws into the bottom of your sled and get your fence totally secure. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's a really super easy process, and it's much easier and more accurate than just using a square. You can use a square initially just to get it close. Set one edge of your square right up here against the saw blade, and then you'll have the other edge come back and sit against your fence. But I struggled for, well, actually years trying to get my crosscut sled perfectly into square, and I came across this method, and I initially thought that it looked confusing and like it would be difficult, but you really don't need that much to do it. Get yourself a cheap set of calipers. This is a Harbor Freight set of calipers, a measuring tape, and a scrap piece of wood, and that's pretty much all you need. You don't even need a feeler gauge. I actually didn't even have one when I built my sled. You can just measure things you have laying around, see what the thicknesses are. You can fold up paper if you need to. I think a normal sheet of paper is normally 3/1000ths of an inch. So you can use different things you have laying around, check what they are, and use those to make your adjustments if you need to. But that's all there is to it. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Thanks for watching.